Welcome into another edition of Carp's Corner. And this is going to be a post-championship game Sunday edition, and absolutely tremendous. The NFL has somehow managed to string together six of the best football games that I personally have ever probably seen. Games that all come down to the final bell, get some bonus time, a little bit of overtime. You get field goals to win it. I'm not sure how they've been able to produce a product that's this good. And I think a lot of it has to do with these great young quarterbacks that we have. And this weekend was further evidence that you need them. But if you want to talk about a league that is able to put a stranglehold on our viewership eyeballs and to be able to put a stranglehold on media rights in a world where we have to DVR everything, once again, the NFL comes through big and gives us two of the best games that you are going to see. Big time stars, big markets, small markets, phenomenal offense, some big defensive plays, really, really good games. There weren't really any games that were marred by calls or long delays or anything like that. There were no players sitting out for COVID. They were able to put together a phenomenal product here to close out the season. I only hope here in a couple of weeks that the Super Bowl is going to be this good, because if it is, that will be the most remarkable 3-weekend stretch. I know there's the bye week, but it'll be the most remarkable 3-weekend stretch that you could probably see. And so we've had 6 good ones. Hopefully we get a 7th and they don't crap out on that, because everybody now is used to watching these elite quarterbacks and watching Joe Burrow and Matt Stafford duel this thing out. Two guys who went number 1 overall in their respective drafts. One guy who was the chosen one, the promised one his entire career. Another guy that had to transfer and battle his way through, ultimately winning a Heisman and going to a franchise that, frankly, a lot of people don't want to go to. And Mike Brown, at the end of the game, they're sitting there doing the trophy ceremony and presentation. The stuff on social media was fantastic about, sounding like going to one more game. Oh, we got to pay for it. Sound like you have to pay for another flight and you got to handle all this stuff. Like it's going to cost more money to go to the Super Bowl. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. Entertaining to say the least, with Mike Brown there at the end of the game. But the Cincinnati Bengals have built this thing one way. The Los Angeles Rams have built it a complete another way. Cincinnati doesn't bring in big free agents. They'll bring in some guys here and there, but a lot of their stuff they build through the draft. The LA Rams, they've punted on the draft, especially on their first-round picks. We'll get into this and continually break it down, but they don't have another first-round draft pick for 3 years. And you look at bringing in Jalen Ramsey, trading for Matt Stafford. They traded for Brandon Cooks a while back, brought in Von Miller, giving up picks for him. Like they have gone all in, and then even bringing in OBJ, who they got off the free agent wire. But they have gone all in on trying to win and just churn this thing over each and every year and then fill out the back end of their roster. It's a very unique way to do it. Something that most people in the NFL, common wisdom, would say doesn't work. And I guess I hearken back to, you look when the Washington tried to do this a number of years, 20 years ago, bringing in, Bruce Smith at the end of his career, Deion Sanders, all these older guys, and they couldn't really play the way that they used to, but trying to bring in some big time guys and build together a super team of older players, kind of like you see in the NBA. And then even watch the Eagles do this, probably 7, 8 years ago, 10 years ago now, where they brought in a bunch of stars and that didn't work. And so this is the first time where you watch all these guys come together. I think it works because the pieces fit well. They fit right. Matt Stafford, great dude. Von Miller bringing in Super Bowl experience, selfless guy. And then you've got the leader, Aaron Donald, who can keep everybody in check, and OBJ for all of his faults and a lot of the stuff that we talk about. The guy works hard and he wants to win. And so all of those things together, that's what's to produce the Rams. Bengals, on the other hand, like I said, drafted. They'll pick some free agent guys here and there. They'll bring in a Kendricks or, they'll bring in a Von Bell, grab Eli Apple off the scrap heap, but they're not out there typically big spenders in free agency. That's not how they operate. So it's two different paradigms of how to build. And now we're going to see, I don't know if we'll really find out which one works better, but we are going to get a champion from one of these two squads who've done it two completely different ways. Let's take a look at the games. Bengals, Chiefs, 27-24. Cincinnati down at 1 point, 18 points, come battling back to being down 21-3. And there's a couple inflection points in this game and different things where I'm going to say that the game kind of turned, and everyone's going to look at, these plays. And this will be my opinion on why they went right or why they went wrong, depending on, which team you're looking at. End of the half. I love Andy Reid being aggressive. You have 5 seconds left in the half. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. You have some of the most explosive players in the NFL. You have a huge tight end in Travis Kelce, who's a big time weapon down there on the goal line. You have no timeouts, and you just gotten a PI call on Eli Apple to give you the ball right there on the goal line. It's 5 seconds. Do you ultimately choose to just kick it and hang it up and go up 24-10, go in the locker room? You're up 21 at this point. Or do you try to go for the dagger and get that 18-point lead? Andy Reid elects to go for the dagger. I like being aggressive. The play that he calls, check over the middle. The outlet is the swing to Hill. I like that play call. I don't like it in that situation, but if you're going to give me Tyreek Hill one-on-one with a corner when he's running full speed and only a yard to go, I'm taking that all day. That is an incredibly tough play for any defender to make. Now, Eli Apple ultimately makes the play. Kudos to him. Huge, huge play for Eli Apple being able to tackle Tyreek Hill on the goal line. And then the half ends, no timeouts, and there wasn't any time on the clock anyway. But with 5 seconds, you have the chance to get a play in. You should have flexed Travis Kelce out, ran a slant or a fade, one step, throw the ball, and it's usually 6. It probably would have had to have been a slant. A fade may have had too much air under it, but if the ball falls to the ground, it's over. It's over. You should have 1 second left, hopefully go out, kick the field goal, and it's all good. But the play had to be incredibly quick. You didn't have time to pat the ball, look around, look back and forth. And that's what Pat Mahomes checks the middle, throws that swing. If he was tackled, it was over. I don't even know if he could have thrown it into the ground at that point. Potentially had enough time. And maybe that's what Pat Mahomes ultimately should have done. But that's the first one. Love the play call. Love the play. Not in that situation, but Andy Reid being aggressive. And that's kind of his calling card. It's something he's always done. And especially when he's got a lot of faith in his quarterback like that, he's a guy going to lean into his offense. And it makes sense. He's an offensive coach, and he has one of the most explosive offenses you're going to find in the NFL. Next big play, inflection point. And this is going to kind of tell the story of the whole second half. Mahomes gets sacked by Sam Hubbard on 3rd down. Now, Kansas City needed only a field goal to tie, but they wanted a touchdown. They wanted to win that thing in regulation. And so the one thing the Cincinnati Bengals had done a great job of is they started 3-man rushing Mahomes. And they were getting there and starting to get some pressure. He was running around, but they were relentless in their desire to ultimately go and chase him down. And they've got 2 nice defensive ends, and then they pulled Sam Hubbard off the ball, and he was the spy. So Holmes is waiting. Sam Hubbard shoots through there. The one thing in that situation you couldn't do is turn the football over. Pat Mahomes knows this. This isn't the same guy who was a first-year starter, sat behind Alex Smith, is inexperienced. This is a guy now that's going to his 4th straight AFC Championship game. He's experienced. He has the big contract. He's won an MVP. He's been to a Super Bowl and won it. He's been to multiple Super Bowls. He's lost in an AFC Championship game to Tom Brady. The dude's got a wealth of experience in the postseason. The only thing you can't do right there is fumble it. And frankly, you don't really want to lose 15 yards to put your kicker in a worse situation. Now, 45 yards is not the longest kick in the world, but it's a heck of a lot longer than kicking one from 28. So he loses all those yards. They put the ball on the ground. Thankfully, Tooney dives on it, saves the day. Huge mistake for Pat Mahomes, drifting around, trying to make a play. Instead, bury the ball in the dirt, throw it away, line up to play again. And then that ultimately leads that after almost throwing an interception in overtime to Eli Apple, tries to take a shot deep to Tyreek Hill. It's batted away by Bates, picked off by Von Bell, and then Joe Burrow gets the ball. The Bengals march down the field and ultimately kick a field goal and win the game. So why? Why? How can the Bengals who played the Chiefs and who gave up 50 some odd points in the first half of their meetings combined. Then in the second halves of the games, 2 30-minute halves, give up a combined 6 points, less than a touchdown in 60 minutes of play to the Kansas City Chiefs. The adjustments they made at halftime, they get locked in. And here is the problem with Andy Reid. How does this happen? You ask yourself. How is a guy, this is the 5th time he's been a favorite, lost as a favorite in a conference championship game. 3 times with the Eagles, 2018 with the Chiefs, and now ultimately again this year. How does this happen? Well, I'll tell you how it happens. You look in the second half, their lack of commitment to running the football. You have the lead. You can salt that game away, but Andy Reid gets bored. They get impatient. The same thing happened, in the first game against Cincinnati. They had the big lead, and as they come back, you start to get nervous. And this is going to be Pat Mahomes' cross to bear. He's an incredible athlete. The guy can throw the football all over the field from any position, like few people in the history of this world have ever been able to do. But sometimes you have to drop, put your foot in the ground, see your first read, second read. If not, check the ball down. Check the ball down. Stay ahead of the chains. And you fall in love with making these big plays. And it started happening earlier in the year. Then they got it corrected. And then they started reverting back to it. In a critical situation, he started reverting back to that and just trying to make the home run play. That's what he did to Tyreek Hill at the end of the game. Listen, you don't need to go win it right now. Just put together a drive. Put together a first down. Get 5 yards on first down. Get 4 on second. It's a 3rd and 1. The Kansas City Chiefs have all the offensive explosive firepower in the world. They can do whatever. They got impatient. Andy Reid gets impatient as a head coach. Doesn't always just like to sit there and run the ball and take what they're giving him. Pat Mahomes, especially, starts trying to do too much. And that's always going to be something of quarterbacks that are athletic, that can throw the football the way that he can. And he gets away with it so often that he can drift back and throw the football 30 yards down the field after giving up 15. And it's a big play and everybody cheers and Tyreek Hill runs through the defense, or Travis Kelce does the same thing. And it's not sound football. And eventually it'll bite you. And if you juxtapose that with Joe Burrow, who always plays inside himself, who looks around on a 3rd and 6, hey, escapes Chris Jones once, escapes him twice, runs the ball for a first down, pulls it down and runs for a first down earlier. Pat Mahomes did that in the first half, especially last week. But Joe Burrow always stays calm. He always stays cool. And he doesn't have the arm mobility and ability to throw from all those slots and to make plays off his back foot. Joe gets it done by staying in the pocket, making sure that he gets the best picture of what he's supposed to do and makes the best play and the best read at that point in time. It's not what the Chiefs have done. It's not what Pat Mahomes does. And we cheer and we applaud because it's awesome to watch, but it's not sound football. And eventually it comes back to bite you. And when does it come back to bite you? In big moments and in big games. And so that is what ultimately happened with the Kansas City Chiefs in the second half. They weren't able to continually go back to that well. And the Bengals said, hey, we're not going to give you the home run. We're going to force you to drive the football and see if you can ultimately do it. See if you want to try to continue to run it. And they ultimately didn't want to do that. And it comes down, like I said, to the lack of patience that both of those teams have. One of the other big numbers from this game was the sacks. And Kansas City, while they don't have the best pass rush in the world, they've got Ingram, they've got Chris Jones. Spags will turn on the blitz and he can move some guys around and confuse people with coverage. They do a great job getting after the quarterback in Kansas City. Joe Burrow was sacked 9 times against Tennessee last week. He was sacked 4 times in the previous meeting. 1 sack on Sunday. Credit the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line. Credit Zach Taylor for making some adjustments. But ultimately, they've had to find a better way to get after him. And Cincinnati tried to run the football. They threw some screens. They did some different stuff to keep him off balance. Credit to them. Conversely, Pat Mahomes, who hardly ever gets sacked because he's so difficult to bring down. He's athletic and he can get the ball out and can always throw it away because his arm's strong enough to get it back to the line of scrimmage. Sacked 4 times. 4 times. And then that last critical sack by Sam Hubbard almost cost them the game as they put the ball on the ground. I don't think that was a statistic that anybody thought would have been flipped like that, where Cincinnati only gives up 1 sack. They yield 1. Kansas City ultimately gives up 4. That's one of the things that's a difference in the game. Romo and Nance were on the call. I love Tony Romo. He's a friend of mine. I played with the guy. And as Cincinnati's driving the football, they're getting in field goal range. And this is what I think makes Romo endearing to a lot of people in the general public, is as they're driving and he's talking about, well, do you kick it on, first or second down, third down? You don't want to wait till fourth in case something happens. And Jim's like, yeah. He's like, sometimes you can fumble the snap. You have something, I might know a little something about that. And Nance glosses over it, doesn't really fully understand because he's probably thinking quarterback and everything else. And Romo comes back, circles around, slides it in again. And it's like, Nance, Jim, I don't think you got what I was putting down there for you. I said you could even fumble a snap when you're trying to go for kick a field goal. That's why you need to be able to have it down to down it. And you could always kick it again. And Nance finally gets it. But to be able to self-deprecate and laugh about something that is one of the most painful moments in his athletic career, professional career. Like, I was there. I was on the field for that. It was incredibly painful for everybody. And looking back, it brought a smile to my face. I laughed about it. Like, man, if you're talking about this, with Jim Nance and diving into this right now in the AFC Championship game, joking about a blunder that you made on a huge national stage in your first year as a starter, good for you, Tony. Good for you. It was very funny, very entertaining, and it brings some levity to the moment. Los Angeles Rams find a way to ultimately beat the San Francisco 49ers. Rams were favored in this game, but didn't really feel like it. Heading in, the Niners had won the last 6 straight games. Kyle Shanahan was in McVay's head. His former assistant couldn't beat the teacher no matter what. And they had Matt Stafford this year. That was supposed to be the difference. Heck, they lost to him when they could have kicked them out of the playoffs. They were still jockeying for playoff positioning at the end of the year, and they couldn't get it done then. The rematch. It's tough to beat a team 3 times during the regular season in a single year. So you get that postseason game. It's hard. It's real hard. And it's been done before, but that doesn't make it any easier. The Rams were able to overcome that and get it done. And before we start getting into the game too much, Deebo Samuel might be the best football player in the NFL. When you talk about holistically what he's able to do, he does what guys do in high school. Take your best player, put him in the backfield, run the ball with him. You flex him out, have him flex it. Heck, you toss it to him, have him throw a pass. He's unbelievable. The guy gobbles up yards, whether it's screens, whether it's passes down the field, whether it's receiving out of the backfield, whether it's running the football. There's not a whole lot that this guy can't do. He's physical. He's strong. He does it in incredibly impressive fashion. Hats off to Deebo Samuel. You saw him after the game, the tears in his eyes, the pain in his face. The guy's a competitor, straight warrior, and I have a massive amount of respect for him. And Kyle Shanahan, perfect coach for him to use him in a bunch of creative ways. But you start looking around, there's very few people in the NFL that can do everything that Deebo Samuel can do. Guy is unbelievable. Going to the game, you got Matt Stafford, obviously the belle of the ball, big-time player, throwing for 5,000 yards. Jimmy G on the other side. They're alluding to it during the game. Would he even be back? This could be his last game in the Niners uniform. Maybe, maybe not. Both of them throw balls up at the end of the game that should have been intercepted. They're throwing hand grenades out there. And somehow both of these guys, you say a rabbit's foot or a horseshoe shoved up your rear, because that's the only way that thing doesn't get intercepted. So both of them get to avoid that, don't get to be the GOAT. But Matt Stafford and the Rams down 17-10, mount this comeback down 10 points, ultimately get it done. The irony is Kyle Shanahan, I think it was the biggest comeback too in NFC championship history, maybe championship history. And the interesting part is Kyle Shanahan was on that team with Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, Falcons, Patriots, when they came back from 28-3. So now he's been on the receiving end of two massive comebacks in both the championship game and the Super Bowl. And so they're trying to run the football. They just couldn't do it. And so you tip your hat to the Rams. Raheem Morris, what they were able to do is to hold San Francisco 20 rushes, 50 yards. That was the difference in the game. When they were able to get the running game going, it's tough. It's real tough to stop that offense. They get the play action game going, the boot game going, and it allows Jimmy Garoppolo to be much more effective. Their game plan, and you know what? This goes back. Bill Belichick does it all the time. I'm going to take away what you do well, no matter what else I'm giving up. I'm going to stop the run, and I'm going to take away the limit the effectiveness of your play action, and I'm going to force it on to Jimmy Garoppolo to go beat you being a drop back passer. And he ultimately couldn't do it. Couldn't do it because that's not the game that they're built to play. Raheem Morris, fantastic job of being able to find a way to slow that offense down. And you did it by stopping the run. And the Rams, while they didn't run the ball all that well, 29 of he rushes 70 yards, they stuck with it enough so that their play action worked a decent amount. And it took some heat off Matt Stafford and slowed down that vaunted defensive line. You know, it wasn't like Nick Bosa was back there all game long. They did a good job of slowing him down, of chips, hanging tight ends, getting the ball out quick. Stafford did get pressured a little bit, but both of these coaches knew that you got Aaron Donald, you got Von Miller, you got Floyd. You look over at San Francisco, you got Nick Bosa in the bunch. I mean, they're a good pass rushing teams on both sides of this. They had good defensive lines, and neither offensive coach was going to let the opposition beat them that way. Massive respect. They had respect for it. They were getting the ball out quick, and they weren't ultimately going to lose by their quarterbacks just getting beat up. They were too smart for that. Last time I'll finish with this on this game. Jimmy G is going to take a lot of heat for that interception at the end of the game. It's 3rd and 13. He's running around. If he takes a sack, it's 4th and 20 something. They have one timeout. There's a minute left. It's ill-advised. He shouldn't have done it, but that's not ultimately what cost him the game. The Niners couldn't run the ball, and their limited effectiveness on the ground pushed it back on him. And this has proven to us that you need a big-time quarterback, because that's how the Rams looked with Jared Goff in the past. When you had to ultimately push it back to him, he couldn't get it done. And you look at Matt Stafford on that final drive, threading that slant to Cooper Kupp, putting it right where it needed to be, pressure in his face, drifts back, boom, hits it. Cooper Kupp catches it, catch and run, 15, 20 yards, explosive gain. That's what Matt Stafford gives you that they weren't getting before with Cooper Kupp. And so you look at this, Pat Mahomes, elite. Joe Burrow, he's on his way. We're putting him in that elite conversation. Matt Stafford, he's there too. Pat Mahomes, all these guys. The one guy who really isn't is Jimmy Garoppolo. And he can get you there and you can win. But as I talked before in previous episodes, your pathway to success is so much tighter when you have a quarterback that you can't just hand the ball to down 10 and say, go win it for us. Go make this up. Joe Burrow was able to do that. Matt Stafford was able to do that. And that's the advantage of having that guy. And so all these teams, 9 coaching vacancies at one point this year, they're starting to get filled up. That's the difference. They're trying to find that guy, and they're trying to find that coaching staff to help get the most out of them. And then you got to find that big play receiver. We'll start getting into all that as it comes down to the construction of these teams and what you need now to win in the NFL. Quickly before we go, Broncos hire Nathaniel Hackett, Green Bay offensive coordinator. Who did they have prior? Vic Fangio, defensive coordinator, head coach. The Raiders bring in Josh McDaniels. They had John Gruden before as their official head coach, offense to offense. Bears going with Matt Eberflus, replacing Matt Nagy, offense to defense now. Before that, who'd they have? John Fox, offense or defense before that. And then the Giants go with Brian Daboll, who before that was Joe Judge, special teams. You put more of a defensive category. And it's amazing how the NFL, the 4 coaches, they're all basically locked in of the 9 openings now. 3 of the 4 have flipped from one side of the football to the other. That's the thinking and the mindset in the NFL. And I don't know if it's accurate. And I don't think that that should be the way that it happens. But I think that there's just something where, hey, we were good here. Now we need to find a way to get good on this side of the football. And it doesn't always develop and it doesn't always work like that with these snapbacks each way. Well, that's it for this edition of Carp's Corner. Can't wait as we drive towards the Super Bowl. Going to be a lot of great stuff to talk about, finishing up these coaching vacancies, getting ready for the draft, the combine, everything. It's all right here. You'll find it all on Carp's Corner. Thanks, guys.